You started noticing something about yourself, and it scared you. You don't explain as much anymore. You don't chase the conversation until your chest hurts. You don't rush to fix the silence, soften the tension, or prove that your heart is still good. Someone says something sharp, someone pulls away, someone repeats the same behavior that once broke you, and instead of falling apart, you pause. And then comes the guilt. You wonder, am I becoming cold? Am I losing the part of me that used to care? Did the pain finally turn me into someone I never wanted to be? But maybe this is not coldness. Maybe this is the first time your nervous system is not begging to be chosen by what kept hurting you. There is a kind of exhaustion that does not look dramatic. It looks quiet. It looks like delayed replies, shorter explanations, calmer eyes, and a heart that no longer throws itself into the fire just to keep someone else warm. You still feel. That is the part nobody sees. You still notice the distance. You still hear the change in tone. You still remember what happened. But something in you has stopped volunteering for the same wound. And this is where everything begins to change. Because there is a difference between becoming cold and becoming free. And maybe the version of you that feels distant is not disappearing. Maybe it is finally protecting what survived. For a long time, your reaction was how you proved you cared. You replied quickly because silence felt dangerous. You explained yourself because being misunderstood felt unbearable. You kept opening your heart even when someone kept mishandling it, because a part of you believed love meant staying emotionally available even when you were being emotionally drained. So now, when you stop reacting the way you used to, it feels unfamiliar. Not wrong, exactly. Just unfamiliar. You notice the message, but you do not run toward it. You hear the tone, but you do not immediately shrink. You sense the emotional distance, but you do not start blaming yourself for it. And because this is new, your mind tries to name it as coldness. But what if it is not coldness? What if it is simply the absence of panic? Many deep people confuse peace with emptiness because they spent so long living in emotional urgency. They became used to proving love through anxiety, used to showing care by over-explaining, used to making themselves smaller so the relationship would not fall apart. And when that pattern begins to break, they feel guilty. Because the old version of you would have tried harder. The old version would have sent another message, offered another chance, swallowed another disappointment, and called it understanding. But the healed part of you is starting to ask a different question. Not, how do I make them stay? But, why do I keep abandoning myself when they hurt me? That question changes everything. Because the wound was not only what they did. It was what you kept doing to yourself afterward. And this is where many sensitive people misunderstand their own healing. You are not loving less. You are finally suffering less for the love you give. There is a quiet psychological shift that happens when you stop confusing reaction with love. Before, every emotional signal felt like an emergency. A different tone. A late reply. A strange pause. A sudden distance. Your body would catch it before your mind could explain it. Your stomach would tighten. Your thoughts would race. You would start searching for what you did wrong, what you needed to fix, what you needed to say before everything slipped away. That was not weakness. That was hypervigilance. It was your system trying to protect you from pain it already knew too well. When you have been hurt, ignored, blamed, or made to feel like your emotions were too much, you learn to scan people. You learn to read the room before anyone speaks. You learn to sense rejection in tiny details. You learn to respond before the wound has even fully opened. And for a while, it feels like survival. But healing begins when your body no longer treats every trigger like a command. You still notice things. You still feel the shift. You still know when someone's energy changes. But now, instead of immediately reacting, you observe. You breathe. You wait. You let the moment reveal itself before you sacrifice your peace to it. That is not emotional numbness. That is self-regulation. Coldness says, I do not care what happens to you. Self-regulation says, I care, but I will not lose myself inside this again. And that difference matters. Because the silence you are afraid of may actually be your nervous system learning safety. For the first time, you are not turning every hurt into a performance. You are not proving your goodness through panic. You are not begging your own heart to bleed just so someone else believes it is real. You are still soft. You are just no longer defenseless. The hidden mechanism was never that you cared too much. It was that you learned to care in a way that cost you yourself. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that if someone was upset, you had to fix it. If someone misunderstood you, you had to explain until they approved of your heart. If someone pulled away, you had to reach harder. If someone hurt you, you had to prove you were not angry, not difficult, not selfish, not cruel. So your reactions became a kind of emotional labor. You were not just responding to what happened. You were trying to prevent abandonment. You were trying to soften disappointment before it became rejection. You were trying to make yourself safe by making the other person comfortable. And maybe nobody noticed the cost. They only saw that you were available, forgiving, understanding, easy to return to, easy to wound and still be welcomed back. But inside, something was breaking. Because every time you reacted from fear, you taught your own heart that peace depended on convincing someone not to hurt you again. And that is an exhausting way to live. If this touched something you have lived through, subscribe to this channel. Here, we speak about the things many people feel in silence, but almost no one knows how to explain. Because this matters, you were not overreacting because you were weak. You were reacting because pain had trained you to move quickly, to repair quickly, to forgive quickly, to disappear quickly. But now, something different is happening. You are no longer performing pain just to prove you have a heart. You are no longer turning every wound into an audition for love. And the part no one talks about is this. When you finally stop reacting, some people will call you cold because they can no longer control you through your emotions. One of the deepest pains of this change is that you may miss the version of yourself that kept trying. Not because that version was peaceful, but because that version felt familiar. You may miss how easily you opened your heart, how quickly you forgave, how naturally you reached for people, even after they disappointed you. You may miss the warmth you gave without hesitation, the hope you carried, the belief that if you just loved harder, explained better, waited longer, someone would finally understand the depth of what you were offering. And now, you do not move that way anymore. You pause before giving access. You think before explaining. You feel the pull to fix things, but something in you says, not this time. And even though that boundary is healthy, it can still feel like grief. Because you are not only leaving people behind. You are leaving behind a version of you who survived by needing them to understand. That is why this stage feels so confusing. You are calmer, but you are also sad. You are stronger, but you are also grieving. You are safer, but some part of you still wonders if safety means you have lost your softness. You have not. You are simply learning that your softness was never meant to be a place where people could leave their chaos. Maybe the hardest thing to admit is this. Some people only recognized your love when it looked like self-abandonment. They called you kind when you tolerated what hurt. They called you understanding when you ignored your own discomfort. They called you loyal when you stayed available through repeated disappointment. But the moment you stopped bleeding quietly for the connection, they felt the difference. And so did you. You still care. You still feel. You still remember. But now, you are no longer turning every silence into a crisis, every distance into a punishment, every wound into a reason to prove your worth. This is not the death of your love. This is the end of using pain as proof that your love is real. The turning point begins when you stop asking, "Am I being cold?" and start asking, "Am I finally protecting my peace?" Because for a long time, you measured your goodness by how much discomfort you could absorb. You thought being loving meant being endlessly available. You thought being mature meant staying calm while someone kept crossing the same line. You thought being understanding meant explaining away behavior that hurt you, because maybe they were tired, maybe they were wounded, maybe they did not mean it, maybe you were expecting too much. But emotional maturity is not letting everything touch you just to prove you are soft. Sometimes maturity looks like not answering immediately. Sometimes it looks like letting someone sit with the consequence of their actions. Sometimes it looks like choosing silence, not to punish, but to protect the part of you that is tired of being dragged into the same emotional storm. Distance is not always abandonment. Silence is not always cruelty. A boundary is not always a wall. Sometimes, it is the first honest thing you have ever built between yourself and the pain you kept excusing. And this is where guilt begins to lose its authority over you. You realize you do not have to bleed emotionally to prove you care. You do not have to destroy your peace to prove your loyalty. You do not have to keep explaining your heart to someone who only listens when your pain benefits them. You can love and still step back. You can feel deeply and still choose restraint. You can miss someone and still know that going back to the same pattern would cost you too much. This is not becoming harder. This is becoming honest. Because your energy is not endless. Your heart is not a place for repeated damage. And your peace is not something you should have to sacrifice just to keep a connection alive. The pattern breaks the moment you stop treating every wound like an invitation to explain yourself. Before, someone could trigger your fear, and you would immediately move. You would clarify. Apologize for things you did not do. Defend the kindness they kept questioning. Try to make them understand a heart they were already choosing to misread. But now, you notice something different. You can feel the urge to react, and still not obey it. You can feel the old panic rising, and still choose not to build a whole conversation around it. You can recognize the pain, without turning it into proof that you must do more. That is growth. Not the loud kind. Not the kind everyone claps for. The quiet kind. The kind that happens when you read the message, feel the sting, and decide your peace does not need to answer every disturbance. You are no longer chasing clarity from people who keep giving confusion. You are no longer teaching empathy to someone who uses your sensitivity against you. You are no longer handing over your energy just because someone knows exactly which part of you still wants to be understood. And if you have lived this, write in the comments, "I am not cold, I am calm now." Because maybe someone else needs to see those words and realize they are not alone. Maybe someone else is sitting there, feeling guilty for finally not reacting, wondering if healing has made them distant. But no, you are not distant from love. You are distant from the version of love that required you to abandon yourself. And once you understand that, the guilt starts losing its power. Because the new you does not need to prove pain anymore. The new you needs peace. At first, this new version of you may feel unfamiliar. Not because it is wrong, but because you are used to being open before you feel safe. You are used to giving access before people earn trust. You are used to making your heart available to anyone who knows how to sound wounded, lonely, regretful, or sorry. But now, something in you has changed. You are not as easy to reach through guilt. You are not as quick to return to the same conversation that left you empty. You are not as willing to confuse someone's potential with their pattern. And that does not make you cold. It makes you awake. The new you is not cruel. The new you is not superior. The new you is not pretending not to care. The new you simply understands that depth without boundaries becomes suffering. You can be compassionate without being consumed. You can be forgiving without reopening the same door. You can wish someone well without letting them back into the most vulnerable parts of your life. That is a different kind of strength. A quieter one. The kind that does not need to announce itself. The kind that does not argue with every accusation. The kind that lets people think what they want, because you finally know what is true inside you. And maybe peace feels strange right now because chaos used to feel like connection. Maybe calm feels empty because your body is still learning that love does not have to come with anxiety. But stay with this version of yourself. It may feel distant at first, but it is not distance from who you are. It is distance from everything that kept pulling you away from yourself. So no, you are not becoming cold. You are becoming someone who no longer negotiates with what already showed you it can hurt you. You are becoming someone who can feel the ache without running back to the source of it. Someone who can love without losing balance. Someone who can remember without reopening the door. Someone who can care deeply, but finally stop confusing care with emotional self-erasure. And maybe some people will not understand this version of you. They may call you distant because you no longer give instant access. They may call you different because you no longer react on command. They may call you cold because your silence no longer means fear. But you know the truth now. This is not coldness. This is the moment your heart stops begging to be respected by people who kept benefiting from your lack of boundaries. You still have love in you. You still have warmth. You still have depth. But now, that depth has direction. It no longer pours itself into every empty place hoping to be valued. If this video helped you understand something you could not name before, stay connected to this space. Subscribe, not just for another video, but because there are parts of your healing that deserve language, recognition, and a place where they are not dismissed. And if you want, write in the comments, "This is not coldness." Because those words may reach someone who is still blaming themselves for finally becoming calm. And in the next video, we are going deeper into something almost no one talks about. Why deep people always pay such a heavy price for feeling, understanding, loving, and noticing so much. Because maybe your depth was never the problem. Maybe the real problem was giving it to people who never knew how to hold it.